about the nitty-gritty of the Olympic Games. What I want to talk about, what I want to explore with you, is a bit more the values, you know, the significance, the meanings of victory. We spoke about this with Michael already, but we're going to look at poetry, and we're going to look at how they somehow thought about victory. What's the meaning of it? Why are we doing this? Before we do that, however, I would like to start with a quick survey. Who knows this singer? Can you raise your hand? All right, good. Yeah. Unfortunately, we're not talking about her. I'm a big fan, so I could give you a lecture about her, but we are not doing it right now. I wanted to bring her in because she has a song that I really like, which is called "The Edge of Glory." And this other guy that we're talking about, Pindar here, was indeed obsessed with glory. Not as cool as Lady Gaga, but indeed obsessed with glory. Who has heard about him, apart from, you know, the quotation that Michael gave? 1, 2, 3, 4. Not many, not most of us, right? Okay. So, Pindar was a lyric poet, not a Homeric poet. He wasn't doing epic. He wasn't doing tragedy or comedy either. So he was doing something else. He was doing what is used as a generic label, lyric poetry. Do you know what ancient lyric poetry looked like, could look like? Do you have any ideas? Have you ever heard about any other lyric poet? Ancient. Lyric.
Was Tyrtaeus?
Sorry?
Tyrtaeus was he?
Yes. Yeah. Tyrtaeus was one. There is a famous one. Woman.
Sappho.
Exactly. Sappho. Well, Pindar wasn't doing the kind of poetry that Sappho was doing, not erotic poetry, but poetry linked to the Panhellenic Games. Not just the Olympic Games, but also the Pythian Games in Delphi, here, the Nemean Games in the Peloponnese, and the Isthmian Games in Corinth, in modern Corinth. These were the four main Panhellenic Games, and Pindar, as a lyric poet, was in charge of singing for the victors. So those who won, the winners, would be celebrated by Pindar. In general, lyric poetry is always connected with an occasion, with a special occasion. Lyric poets sing for something that is, a special occasion, an event, and Pindar was, in particular, not only, but in particular, in charge of singing for winners. Now, it's not that Pindar was, inspired to sing about victory because he loved winners. It was because he was paid. So, as any other kind of patronage, he would be paid. He would be, well, first of all, asked for a song. He would be paid for that song. Sometimes he would also be hosted by his, patron. So imagine I'm an athlete, I win at a competition, and then I'm like, well, I kind of want a song written about me winning at that game, and I invite Pindar, and Pindar comes in, sits on my table, I feed him, I pay him, and in exchange, he writes me a song. Why would I be doing this? You have some hints already listed there, but, would you do that? Why would you do that? Yeah?
Because it was an easy way to get word about your victory out to the people.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, back there was no internet, right? So it wasn't really easy to promote your victory. And a very, very important concept for the ancient Greeks. If nobody's talking about it, then that thing doesn't exist. we need to talk about things. We need, heroes need their Homer. Without Homer, there are no heroes because we don't know them. We forget about them. So memory was very, very important. It was important to memorialize the victory. Beyond, what Michael was saying, victory at any cost, there was the aftermath. Even if you are a winner, but nobody knows about your victory, well, for the Greeks, who cared? At the same time, we saw that to take part in games, you needed to be rich. You needed to be part of the elite. So it was most of the time politically important and socially important families that could afford to train for the games and to take part in them. So after winning, it was important for this family to promote their power, to say, well, you know what? Not only we won, but we won because we are very rich, because we're very powerful, everybody in our community loves us. If you read the Pindaric odes, these are many of the themes that recur consistently, all the times. He talks about wealth, and he says, well, wealth put away in a cupboard doesn't help you. You need to spend it. You need to spend it on what? On songs. First of all, you train, for the victory, and then when you have achieved that, you spend it on me, basically, he says. There was also an important thing, an important aspect for the community. Think about the celebrations for, World Cup. When a nation wins at football World Cup, the team members are welcomed back home as heroes. They are reintegrated into the community. We see them as these very important, glorious individuals, and at the same time we reclaim them. We say, hey, those are ours, heroes. Those our, heroes. Those are our people that went and won. And it's also a way to involve the community. We don't know exactly still how Pindaric odes, how these poems were performed. We know that Pindar composed them. We don't know if he performed them. It's possible that a lot of times there were choral ensembles that performed them. So there were these groups of, trained boys and girls singing the song that Pindar wrote. It's possible that banquets were organized by the winner to celebrate his victory, and the song would be played at that banquet. But it's also possible that when the winner came back to his community, big celebrations were held, and Pindar's song would be played, would be performed. So it was really a way to show off, but also to give something to the community as well. To try and integrate the community as saying, well, we won, we as a family won, but this victory is important for everyone. When I asked you who had heard about Pindar before, I think I got less than 5 people. Anyway, less than 10. This is because Pindar is definitely not your average classic poet. His texts are very difficult, even in translation. And the reason is because they refer a lot to context. They refer a lot to the specific occasion. But we don't know all about that occasion, all about that specific victory. So a lot of times we are left wondering, why is he even telling here this thing? So it's difficult in translation. We are going to read bits and pieces. You're going to see that even when it doesn't refer to details of the occasion, his way of talking is still a bit weird, a bit, far-fetched. It was so far-fetched that Horace We have heard about Horus? Yeah, right? Who was him? Roughly? What did Horus do as a job? What would he write in his CV? Yeah?
Did he write poems?
Yes, he was a poet, Greek or Latin? Rome, therefore Latin, yeah, exactly. Roughly, when was he alive? Yes, yeah, exactly, in the age of Augustus. Well, Horace, who was writing celebratory poems for Augustus, Horace himself starts a poem saying whoever tries to rival Pindar is doomed, like Icarus, to give his name to glassy water. What myth are we talking about here? What myth is Horace? Yeah?
About the myth of Icarus and Daedalus escaping Crete and King Minos, and how Icarus flew too close to the sun and his wax wings melted and he fell into the sea and died.
Exactly. So the idea here is that if you try to imitate Pindar, if you try to imitate his lofty style, well, you're going to fail. You're going to immediately, be doomed. So Pindar is difficult. He is not really read almost at all. For my PhD, I studied the reception of lyric poets like Pindar in the imperial period. And I can tell you that even in the imperial period, the people who read this poetry, were only a few. Only a few people who could bear, to read scholarship, to understand the poem, because it is rather difficult. So the question is, really, why should we bother, right? I mean, why are you boring us with this guy if he is so difficult to understand? Well, the thing is that I've always felt that Pindar still talks to us somehow. And as you have understood probably from Michael's presentation, here at Warwick we are always looking for ways to understand how classics still can talk to us, can still be relevant. And why is Pindar still relevant? Well, we are still competing. There are going to be games here. There is, in general, I think, a tendency to be competitive in our society. I think we can, all agree. To have this job that I'm in right now, to talk with you, I had to compete for, funding, for example. So we are always competing. We are still competing, right? So the way in which Pindar writes about victory, the way Pindar writes about, putting an effort into something can still speak to us because we still are very much concerned with, somehow being competitive. And bottom line, we are still very much concerned with how we are seen by others. I'm gonna come back on this last point, but in general, we can read Pindar and ask ourselves, why do we compete? Why do I compete for something, right? For my personal, professional successes. Why do you want to have great, exam results? What is glory? How does glory make us feel? And why is it so important? Should it be so important? So we can also, start questioning these values. We don't have to accept that as, the Greeks only wanted to win, we should do the same. No, we can question these values. And we can also think a bit more how victory relates with human condition. If we were God, would we be bothered by the idea of winning? If we were immortal, would we want glory? So, in the next, well, I would say 20 minutes or so, probably less, don't worry, we're going to see some snippets of Pindar text, and we're going to try and, see if there is any wisdom in them, what this wisdom is. But we're also going to question it. We don't have to take it as, a ready-made parcel of ancient wisdom and accept it. We can question it. It is very, very important that we do that. The first part, the first set of texts, two texts, concerns the feeling. How do we feel when we win? And why is it so important for us to feel like that as humans? Now this is a Pythian 8. Pythian means that it was written for a guy, Aristomenes, who competed at the games in Delphi, so not the Olympic Games, the Delphi Games, but they were still important, they were still Pan-Hellenic Games. And he was a young wrestler. So as Michael has illustrated, he was probably, covered in blood when he won and dust. Pindar takes his victory and makes something else out of it. Michael also already quoted this bit. I'm going to complain with him later because he stole it from me, I didn't know. But as we have already seen, here Pindar is talking about how dreadful it is not to win. How dreadful it is, not to be successful and come back to your community and face, the, well, not really welcome back. It's interesting because this is a text for a wrestler. And in this passage and in the next, we see a lot of tension. We do see a sort of wrestling. The poet is wrestling between positive and negative ideas. Here he's talking about something negative. Here he's saying, well, all your competitors that you beat them, literally. They went home and they had a very, very hard time going on like that. They had to hide. Look at that, they shrink down alleyways. It's like, I don't want to be seen. I want to be in the dark. And look at that beaten by failure. How does it feel when we are hurt? How does it feel when we really, really want something and we don't get it? I don't know about you, but I feel something here in my stomach. It's like something is really biting me. And Pindar is, in just a few lines, putting all these feelings, all these emotions there in poetry. Mind, he is celebrating a winner. So this is very interesting. Ancient scholars reading this poem were complaining. We find commentaries, ancient commentaries, where scholars are like, why is he even saying these things? This guy won. Can't he just say, you won, you're amazing, great? No. He is taking a moment to think about failure. He's taking a moment to think about how failure really feels. And he says, failure hits you in the gut. Just a thought, parenthesis. I was thinking about this idea of failure. I was thinking about how we relate to failure nowadays. And I don't agree with this survey somehow, because here, the culture test or whatever, they say that our world, our Western world, here, right, we're here, is motivated by guilt, by the sense of guilt. It's true, we do, try not to feel guilty, and feeling guilty is very important. Well, not feeling guilty is very important for us in our society. But I think there is also a sense of shame. We are still ashamed of failure, aren't we? The Greeks according to Pindar, were very afraid of failing. But my question is, and is an open question, should we be ashamed of failure? Can Pindar, if we, take him upside down, can Pindar also teach us not to be afraid of failure? Anyways, since, as I was saying, the positives balance the negatives in this poem, Pindar, really, as nothing has happened, goes on. But he who has been allotted a new success is inspired by hope at his great splendor and takes flight on the wings of many deeds. This idea of taking flight, this idea of, feeling elated, I think is still very much there in our culture. What do we say when we get something we really wanted? Or, everything is going according to plan. Well, sometimes we can say, I'm on top of the world. I feel I'm flying. I feel I'm, there is definitely something about winning and going up. Not hiding, but going up. Right? And then again, Pindar goes back into depressive mode and says, in a short time, the delight of mortals burgeons, but so too does it fall to the ground when shaken by hostile purpose. Creatures of a day, what is someone, what is no one, a dream of a shadow is man. Really? Like, you are celebrating a winner, and you're telling me that, we're all gonna die, time is not enough, and all this stuff. Why are you doing this? That's the key. Because this is the reason why we want to win. We are trying to win, we are trying, to become someone because we're afraid of becoming no one. We're afraid that people forget about us. That, we are just not immortal because we are not. So the reason why, we can still read Pindar is to try and reflect about our human condition. Why do we really want, to become a famous, what's that thing that they do now? Influencer? I mean, I don't, because I wouldn't be doing classes, but, why are people still trying to become famous? What do we gain from it? Apart from money, and other nice things. What do we gain from it? Why do we want people to talk about us? Well, Pindar is saying because when that happens, you feel elated. And not only up, there is not only up, going up, there is also light. A shining light rests upon man when, and this is the caveat, when Zeus gives you success. And this is my second point. In Pindar, it's not important just to be great. You also need to be favored by the gods. Look at this other snippet. This is from a completely different text. It's from an ode for a boy that did the pentathlon. And this is from the very beginning of the text. Since this is an ode for a boy, Pindar is addressing a goddess, which is called Elated, which is this lady here, who was the goddess of birth. So this is a boy, this is, a young person, and so Pindar says, well, everyone has a different destiny, but by your grace, meaning by the grace of the goddess of birth, Sojournes is made famous in song for his excellence. So there is this sort of tension, and I've always found it rather paradoxical, between being excellent, so the skills that you have, the effort that you put, the money that you spend on training, and etc., but also the intervention of the gods. Do we have something similar nowadays? We can still believe, in the help of a, divine entity. Do we have something else when we talk about victory? If an athlete wins, what else can it be that brought him to victory or her to victory? Yeah?
Their effort.
Sorry?
Their effort.
Yes, exactly. So that would go with his excellence. But then,
The influence of the coach.
yes. And yes, so we're moving towards, well, it's luck, isn't it? It's luck. Do you know Matteo Berrettini? No? Well, I know him because he's a famous tennis player. He was, about to compete in Wimbledon, and he was really, really a strong one. Well, he got COVID. He's not competing anymore. So, Matteo Berrettini has excellence, but he doesn't have luck in this case, right? Pindar wouldn't say, well, the gods looked gracefully at you. Sometimes, we are not lucky enough. And in Pindar, this is represented by the gods. This is represented by, the intervention of the gods. In this passage, Pindar also says something we have already mentioned. Sojournes is famous not because he won. He is famous because somebody, Pindar, is now singing about him. If a man succeeds in an exploit, he casts a honey-minded cause, and we're wondering what are you talking about, into the Muses' streams. Well, Pindar here is basically saying you give to a poet, the Muses' streams, a reason to sing for you if you win. For great deeds of valor remain in deep darkness when they lack hints. So remember the darkness that Aristophanes' opponents had to hide in because they failed? Well, the same darkness is there even if you win. You win, you get your bright moment, but then everything fades. Because people are not talking about you. Because people don't know about you. And he mentions his own poetry, he refers to his own poetry as a mirror for noble deeds. And I was thinking, do we have something similar today that we all can use as a mirror for our noble deeds or for what we consider successes? And we also always want to show off using them. How do we do self-promotion? Yeah, exactly. We do have a mirror for noble or not noble deeds. Values have changed. So, but again, this is still talking to us. This is, still relevant. And about relevancy, I think you heard, well, you must have met it at some point, that slogan, I think it's Adidas. Impossible is nothing, right? Nike has just do it. Yeah, and every time I read it, I think, yes, thank you very much. Yeah. I was just waiting for you to tell me that I shouldn't be doing it. Yeah. Was thinking about it a lot when I started writing my book. I thought, yeah, just do it. Yeah. Anyway, is impossible really nothing? Is nothing really possible? What can Pindar, again, tell us? Well, this is, again, interesting. In Pindar, you need to be favored by the gods to win, right? And you need to be skilled. But that's not even enough. Now, in this Olympian 9 for another wrestler, Pindar is telling us that if our skills are taught to us, and they don't come, from inspiration or they don't come from the gods, then we're worth nothing. So it's very interesting to see how, he raises the boundaries of glory all the time. It's not enough to be skilled, it's not enough to be, lucky. You really need to be, in possession of special skills. This is a completely different narrative from the narrative that we have nowadays, right? Because nowadays we want to believe, and I hope we can believe that if you want something and you put an effort, well, you can achieve it. Or, within some limitations. I can't become a top model, clearly. So I would never think about becoming one. But, with some limitations, I wanted to become a teacher, and that's what I'm doing. Right? So, I was taught by people. I had trainers. Here, Pindar is saying, well, no. That's, there are special individuals that are somehow above humankind. And I think we can question this one, right? We can really question Pindar on this. Is it true that, if we are not especially skilled since the beginning, we can't achieve something? We can learn, we can always learn. After all, he was praising athletes, and athletes had trainers. So they were learning something. After reading this bit, we would never ever think that Pindar was able to praise a diverse athlete. An athlete that had some, peculiarities. I mean, he wasn't fitting the mold. He wasn't just like the others. He was special. Special because, well, these Melissus here competed in the Pancratium. So he had to fight, he had to wrestle with his opponent. And Pindar says, well, you were bold like a lion, and you were skilled, you were, well, cunning like a fox. But then he moves on and says that our Melissus is insignificant to look at. He is short, tiny, a bit like me, right? So it's interesting because the Greek for insignificant is more than that. There are some translators that render it as ugly. So here we have a diverse athlete. After reading, this thing, you would have never thought Pindar able to surprise you like this. And still, yet he surprises us by celebrating an athlete that is not like, our sort of heroic kind of image of masculinity. He is different, but Pindar says this is why he won. Because he was able to trick his opponent. And in this case, his tiny stature was helpful. Pindar celebrates him so much that he also twists the myth. He takes the Olympic hero that we have mentioned with Michael, Alcmene's son, Hercules, and make him into a dwarf, basically. So here Pindar describes Hercules as short of stature but of unbending spirit. Scholars have discussed this a lot. It's probable that the poet here is referring to a version of the myth of Heracles that linked him to some Egyptian dwarfs. You can see some images of them in the British Museum now. Here you have another one. This is called the Bess. It's just a very, very powerful and mighty short being, right? What Pindar does is he takes this figure, overlaps it with Hercules, and says, well, there you go, Melissus won because he is like Hercules. Not the Hercules that we all know, but this other one, this special one. Of course, Pindar was paid to do this, so he had to try and celebrate Melissus however he could. But I still find interesting that instead of hiding the diversity of Melissus, he foregrounded it. He said, no wait, this guy was insignificant. He wouldn't have given him a dime. He wouldn't have said this guy could win. Instead he won. So this was just brief and intense, probably. Exploration of what Pindar can still teach us or not teach us, at least make us think about. Here are a couple of suggestions for translations. There is the Lord edition that I used before, it's the classical one. You have the Greek text as well there, if you are curious about it. There is the edition by Verity, is just a translation in the Oxford Classics. And then if you are looking for a nice introduction to this guy, there is Stoneman Pindar, excellent introduction. Last but not least, don't forget to use the other resources that we have on our Classics and Ancient History of Warwick YouTube channel. We want to do self-promotion. We are very much into using the mirror for noble deeds. And here are a couple of links for my own videos about music. Thank you very much. I hope I didn't bore you.
Thanks so much, Francesca. I think we've got time for maybe one or two questions as we sort of swap things over. If anyone's got a question about Pindar or anything else, put your hand up.
Or Lady Gaga.
Or Lady Gaga.
Yes?
How much would a winner pay something like Pindar to write
Sorry, I didn't get that. I'm gonna get here.
How much would Pindar
How much? We have no idea. We have no idea. But we can say that it wasn't just about being paid in money. It wasn't just about being paid, with coins or riches. It was a matter of hospitality. So Pindar would be taken in. It was a sort of artist in residency. Have you ever heard about that? You could basically give him accommodation, provide him with food, and he would write and possibly perform the poem of greetings. Does it make sense? Of course, it wasn't such a money-oriented society. He lives and works between the archaic and classical period, so they really weren't into money that much. It was more a matter of, really sustenance.
Anyone else? If not, thanks very much, Francesca.
Thank you.